Okay, it's a minute after 10, and it's time for some open hours. Let's talk about GitHub, our new pull request model, and we'll do a live walkthrough of contributing code into the core. Now, this is a different process, a different workflow than contributing a gallery module. So we'll go over this one. And I'm assuming that most of you don't need a demo of contributing a gallery module, but we'll probably put one of those together in a tutorial or something like that at some later date. But I'd like Eric, actually, if you wouldn't mind running the show. You put together this great agenda for us to cover today, and I've got some supporting tabs and things open, but I want you to just guide us along here. Before we get started, just one little programming note, which is that 341 is scheduled for a preview release in, gosh, what was this, about like 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks? Ryan, do you remember? Jenny?
Something like that, yeah. End of September, I think.
Yeah. End of September. Yeah. So a lot of changes going into there, mostly bug fixes, but that makes it super important for everyone that filed a bug, obviously, to go in and hit that preview release to make sure that we've only fixed stuff and we didn't unfix some other things. So just so you know, that's coming up. And as a follow-up from last week, we do have final dates for YUI They're going to be, well, they're actually posted on YUI blog. So look, there they are. Save the date for YUI 2011, and you can check out the blog for that. So, all right, with that, Eric, why don't you give us a rundown?
Yeah, so one of the recent changes we've been doing is starting to use GitHub more, and this has mainly come about because of the recent changes GitHub has done, where they've made pull requests better and their issues better and integrated with pull requests. And so what we did is we actually created or changed the YUI user account on GitHub into an organization. So now GitHub/YUI is our organization page. It shows the core team members and all the projects. So that was one thing that we did, and it makes things a lot nicer to organize and more semantic for what YUI actually is. And so we've also now adopted using the GitHub pull request mechanism for people to contribute changes to the core library. Normally, we would imagine these being bug fixes, documentation changes, because if people were going to be wanting to submit a new module to YUI, they would probably start off with it being a gallery module and going from there. So, but if you find a fix and you fix it locally because it's breaking your application, then you can submit a pull request to us, and we will the team members will be notified. And so what we want to do today is kind of walk through that process and talk about the different parts of it, and actually submit and merge in a pull request for a fix that we have.
Right, and it's important to note that there really are two different types of pull requests against the core. One is code, and the other is documentation. So the example that we're going to do today is documentation because it's a little bit lower bar, easier to do, and will certainly fit within the hour. And we'll talk about the differences between the documentation pull request and a code pull request as we're going along. The one that I showed you over here is Pat's pull request that he did back on August 23rd, and there are different little parts. There are different parts to this, and a different bar to meet when you're contributing code requests and or code pull requests, and Pat's done a fantastic job of that. But yeah, so we'll do documentation examples.
Yeah, so and also some of the other cool stuff is we plan to use pull requests to the YUI main master repo internally too, where say if I'm working on a really big change to the core library, I can use the pull request mechanism through GitHub to make this change public, have a discussion with other team members in the community, and also have a code review so that people can look at my code, suggest changes, and so we also plan to be able to use pull requests for that as well. So there's more insight into the development process.
And the coolest part of that is, like you said, the community can submit feedback too. So those pull requests are totally public and visible, and you guys can get in there and comment on code and tell us we're doing things wrong and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So our pull requests will look exactly like this.
Yeah. So Luke, should we just go through and share links to we have the contribution tutorial or contribute tutorial, and this would be for if people haven't already forked the YUI 3 project and have their own fork of it. And so we had this great tutorial which kind of goes through step by step on how to create your own fork on GitHub of the YUI project. Also, it has links to getting set up with Git if you're not set up with Git, and a link to our CLA, which is now in an online format so that it can be submitted all digitally and not have to mail anything in. So that's a really great resource, especially if it's been a while between your pull request to us and you're trying to remember the workflow. There are some steps outlined there. So somebody's asking in the chat room, don't we have it already on GitHub? Have what already on GitHub? Well, so with the way that it works with the repository in Git is that every user basically has their own copy of the YUI 3 source, and the YUI main source of truth that we have on GitHub is considered like the main master branch of the YUI 3 project, but everyone else has their own fork, which is most of them are probably really up to date and in sync with the main truth, but they may differ, and that's where when people make changes on their own forks, they can submit those changes over to the master one to have them merged in. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but so we have these resources. We have that tutorial. It has some good steps for the workflow, but we want to go through an example of one to show the nuances or details and provide an opportunity for people to ask questions along the way, and also help us figure out how we can make that tutorial more clear going forward.
Right, so we're going to start with this one that David Martin noticed the other day and tweeted out this info on Twitter, which is a nice place to start the conversation. But this is so we're going to use his example here that he referenced there, and we went back and forth with him a little bit and asked him to file a ticket, and he did so very nicely. And we really do appreciate you filing tickets separately from pull requests. You don't technically have to file a ticket with a pull request. Personally, I prefer to see a separate ticket exist for an issue that you find, especially in code. In terms of documentation, whatever. But if it's a code, I like to see a separate ticket for the issue, just describing the issue, and then a pull request that references that ticket. And the reason being that the ticket identifies the problem, and the pull request offers a potential solution. But the pull request is going to be reviewed, and it'll we'll go back and forth on that, or we might just say there's actually a lot more to the story. It's a little more complex than that. So end up closing out the pull request without actually accepting it or processing it. And so that doesn't invalidate the ticket. If there's still an issue with the code, then the ticket should still stick around. And so the ticket should describe the problem, and then the pull request can reference the ticket as a solution. For documentation pull requests, maybe it's not so important, or for just little code issues where the issue itself is really not that complicated, then we can, if you file a pull request, issue a pull request here, we see a pull request coming in, then we'll create a ticket for you if it's something pretty straightforward. Like Ryan did this one for Pat. But
hey Luke, go back to that tweet for a second. How are we
yeah.
getting that embedded content in there? That's pretty cool.
That's just Twitter.
Oh, well, that's great.
Yeah. So David pointed out that there was a typo on the image loader's user guide, and so it said it was something like set trigger. Yeah. So there are a couple issues. Set trigger shows up a couple of times, but actually the method is supposed to be add trigger. You can see it actually down here, and the API docs confirm that it should be add trigger. So a simple little typo. And pretty easy thing to fix. So, Satyam, what do you mind a problem with which page? It says branch-based workflow or checkout. It doesn't say. Why would I do that? Push part is within the branch workflow. Okay.
So I think maybe he's talking about
this one here.
Tribute tutorial.
Yeah. Okay, this one here.
Yeah, so the branch-based workflow that it talks about a little bit further down, Luke, is the idea is you pull the latest YUI3 code from the official repo, and then you check out -b my feature, where my feature is the name of a new branch that you're going to create to start implementing your changes. And then the idea is you make your changes only in this branch so that this branch contains only the changes that you want to send a pull request for. So maybe on your master branch or in some other branch, you might have a bunch of other changes that you don't want to put in this pull request. This allows you to keep them separate in their own little branch. And then you would...
So maybe what's missing here is just a little more verbose documentation about the reasons for why you're taking these steps and a little more explanation of what each of those steps does.
Yeah.
The actual flow of code is perfectly reasonable. So.
And I think the sequence, I don't think the sequence here is wrong. So what you do is first on your master branch, you pull from upstream to get all the latest changes. Then you create a new branch, my feature, based on those changes. Then you make some changes, commit your changes, and then in your my feature branch, you pull again from master to make sure that if master has changed, you get the latest changes on top of your changes, and then you push your changes to GitHub. So yes, you do, with Git, the branching is all local. So it's not like Subversion where creating a branch actually goes out remotely and creates a branch. When you create a branch in Git, it's only on your machine until you push it somewhere.
Right. So the last step here, you're actually pushing the branch that you created. You're pushing that back out to origin, which in this case is GitHub.
And it would be your GitHub account or your GitHub fork.
So
I think also, yeah, what we could do is add like Satyam is saying, more a little more explanation around it, but then probably we can link off to various articles either on GitHub or other people have written that we think are good resources. I know on there's a link towards the top of this page, Luke, that references our Getting Started with Git tutorial page.
Let's get the
And at the
installation
very
and
bottom of
configuration.
the Getting Started with Git page, we have links off to a bunch of different resources. I believe Dave curated these links. So we could also look to see which one of these guides may apply to that branching workflow, because we really want to encourage the use of topic branches, or creating branches for a particular set of cohesive changes. So that way it would make it much easier for us to merge in and not like mix together totally unrelated changes. And especially when doing pull requests that way, that a single pull request is off a particular topic branch that has commits that are all related and nothing else mixed in with it.
Right. So in the case that you start down the road of fixing something and then you get distracted, or there's just a little bit more work to do there and you want to spend a little more time with it, you have that work living on a branch somewhere, and you can go back to your master branch and then create a new branch that you can start doing other development on, and you aren't stuck in the situation of making a pull request where you have some partially done work from this other fix that you were working on before you were distracted or whatever, and that's sort of muddying the waters. So all of that work is then isolated over in that feature branch. I know that I get distracted a lot, so branches are awesome.
GitHub actually has a lot of great tutorials for just general Git topics. If you go to the GitHub help pages,
It's
you
true.
got some really nice stuff there.
Yeah, so they may have a good article already describing a branch workflow like we're trying to promote.
Yeah. Actually,
for
the
people
GitHub
contributing to
Bootcamp up
YUI.
there, the GitHub Bootcamp at the top is a great place to start. It
Mm-hmm.
walks you all the way through from getting Git running to creating and forking repos and sending pull requests and everything.
Yeah, I'm sure it does a much better job, and certainly a much more colorful job than we do on our own.
Yeah, you can flesh ours out though.
But yeah, but it's all good. We all work together like Voltron. All right, shall we go through the process then?
Yeah, I think we should.
All right, let's see. Okay, so Eric, why don't you just tell me what to do, and I'm going to bring up my editor and get
Okay.
and we'll work on it like that.
So our task here is that we want to make these changes to the documentation isolated on a branch, and then submit a pull request to YUI to say, hey, we fixed these changes, and kind of treat it like you're an external contributor to YUI for this.
Right. So I'm going to cheat
I,
on the first. I'm going to cheat on the first step since I already have a fork. But let's see. So here if I go into YUI3, if I didn't already have a fork, then the first thing I do is I create a fork, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
why doesn't that say your fork? That's weird.
So, and then mine is here. There are many like it, but this one is mine. And then you're going to, when you create a fork, it'll tell you that you can do, you can clone that locally, and then it guides you on how to set up your local.
Yeah, right after you create a fork, GitHub gives you all the instructions on that. So
hardcore forking action.
Yes,
yeah.
hardcore forking action.
So what, Luke, what you'll want to do then is, or can you make your text bigger in your terminal?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay.
There we go.
So you're already in the image loader directory, huh?
Right.
And you're on your current master branch.
Yeah, I'm using a fancy little script in my shell that displays what branch I'm currently on and the modified state of it. So right now I do have some local modifications on my master branch that are stuff in Sandbox that I just haven't cleaned up or whatever. But it's not, nothing is committed at this point. It's not, well, anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
So what is
so
your
just some stuff in Sandbox and then some things that I haven't committed yet into a separate branch. But the but the first thing I need to do though is if I'm planning on making a change here is I need to come over here then I guess.
So, I mean, at this point, you actually have, well, it may not like that.
What's that?
I'm wondering if you're going to want to stash these changes,
No, so
because
the difference is
otherwise,
these changes are untracked changes, meaning
Right.
they're not in Git at all. So
Yeah.
basically Git will ignore them. He can create a new branch and he can do whatever. And until he adds these changes to Git, it won't worry about it.
Right.
oh yeah, you're right. I didn't realize they were untracked files. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a change. I've got my fork. I'm in my directory. I'm on the master branch, but I want to get off. So the git checkout command checks out a branch, or that actually checkout works in a lot of different ways. But the -b flag that you see there, that will create a branch for you named that, and then check it out. So it's a little bit of shorthand, right? So in this case,
And the reference point for this checked out branch will be your current master. So,
right.
um,
So there might actually be some changes up on Origin or maybe upstream that I'm not, that I haven't yet pulled into my local repo, and I've now left them behind when I branched off of master at that point. I'm branching off of master at that state. So now my image loader branch also does not have those changes in it. So if I change back into master and I pull those changes from upstream, they still don't exist on my image loader branch. But that's if we jump back into where did it go? It was around here somewhere. Right. So if we jump back into where did it go? There we are. Into this step right here, after we have committed our changes into our branch, we're doing a git pull upstream master. This is going to then make sure that my current branch, any changes that I left behind, that I may have left behind in my master branch or that didn't get pulled into my master branch before I've branched, those all get pulled down and merged into my local branch, my image loader branch here, before I then push back up to Origin. Hopefully
and the reason that you want to do that is to make sure that your changes don't conflict with anything that's been happening upstream on the main YUI, within the main YUI repo. And to make sure that your changes work with anything that's been committed since you created this branch.
Right, and also if you're behind, it'll just tell you no. You can't push. There's that. So now the change is in the docs directory, right? So let's see. Now index.mustache, that's where it is. I actually opened this up in TextMate, but let's see. So this is actually the same file, the intro or the index.mustache file. And so this is the documentation.
Luke, do you want to show the actual user guide on the site that this corresponds to, the source is for?
Yeah. So this is actually, there we go. So this content right here,
Oh, are you still there, Luke?
Awesome. I guess we lost Luke.
Yeah. It looks like he's still online, so maybe his connect session just crashed.
Yeah. Well.
So one of the things we can say while we're waiting for Luke to get back, with the new with the latest release that we did 3.4, we included all of our user guides and examples within the source code, within the YUI 3 source code. So that way, you guys in the community can, when you spot issues or bugs in our documentation or ways that they can be improved, those can be changed right directly in the source code that's sitting alongside the JavaScript files for those modules. Whereas before, that stuff never existed publicly. It was all in a private repo. So now that all that stuff is public, it'll be much easier for people to contribute documentation changes directly. So if, let's see. Okay, so Luke's coming back right now. He should be back.
So I imagine Luke will probably talk about this when he starts sharing again. The documentation that you saw, he was editing a mustache file, and mustache is just a simple templating language that we use. And there's a tool that Charles just mentioned in chat called Celic that will actually render that mustache into HTML and can either generate static HTML files or you can run it in server mode at dev time to see your changes as you're making them. So I imagine, looks like Luke's back now, so he'll probably touch on that.
Yeah, I'm back. I do have a Celic server running. That's actually a topic for another open hours. I think it's definitely worth covering. Because Celic is pretty sweet. But right, sorry I dropped off there. That was Connect being impolite. So let's see. Now here I am. Let's just look for set trigger. Find that.
Yeah.
Actually,
so the docs had this user guide had the wrong name for a method, and so we're going to change set trigger to add trigger, right?
Oh yeah, we can just do it here. Add trigger, wrap around. Okay. Let's just replace all. Okay. So now add trigger should be fixed. So let's find nothing. So all done there. So now I'm going to save this out. And I'm going to close out that just so that maybe Connect won't crash on me again. So now I have that file locally, as I mentioned here, index.mustache in the docs directory. I've now updated that. Look at that timestamp. And so before I issue a pull request, I'm going to want to take a look at it. For doing documentation changes, you'll want to get a Celic server running, and we can cover that in the YUI chat room, and we can have another open hours about that. Oftentimes, a simple documentation change, if you're just changing a word, it might seem like overkill to have a Celic server running. And you could probably just issue a pull request without it if it's a simple text change, because we're going to want to look at it when we review the pull request anyway. But here, running on my local host is my Celic server, and so I'm going to look at the new version of this file, and I'll size up here a bit, but I'll do the search again, set trigger, and I don't find it, right? So this is actually showing that the change that I made is made. Add trigger, so we're good to go now. Eric, I made the change. What do I do next?
Yep. So now you probably want to do a get status just to see what your current state is for your repo. And so one of you have your untracked file still there at the bottom, which we can ignore. because they're not in Git, and then you have this one change here. So, and you're on your image loader branch, so you're on your topic branch, and we can go ahead and commit this change. So okay, so now you're adding it to the next commit, and since it's the only change we want to add, we can go ahead and commit this. So one thing we should do here is, write a message, a clear commit message to describe the change you made.
This should be clear for anybody that understands regular expression syntax substitution. And then, since this is actually fixing a bug, I want to reference that bug number.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, so GitHub uses their similar fixes syntax. So I wonder what would happen if you also put that it fixes, what, or we don't have that. Never mind. Sorry.
Yeah, there's no pull request at this point here. So just as a side note here, for good git commit message policy, the idea is to have a simple, short description, just a single line summary that I think that caps usually about 60 characters. I forget, but if you notice here, if I keep typing, it turns white on me, right? So this is giving me a hint that that I should truncate my message right about there, and then subsequently, after a new line, empty new line, we'll put in a more full description here in plain English, if that is your, well, in plain language, I suppose. English is preferred for YUI commits so that people that are reviewing the Git logs can understand what's going on. But we'll just say a simple typo fix. Props to Dr. Martin for the keen eye. Right? Done. So that is now committed onto my image loader branch. Okay, now what?
All right. So now what you should probably do is make sure that you're up to date with the current YUI's master branch. So do you already have, why don't you look at your, yeah, I was going to have you look at your remotes to make sure that you have an upstream branch pointing, or an upstream remote pointing to YUI. So you can do
How do I do that?
dash V. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is showing the remote repositories that you added that your local repository knows about. And in this case, you already have added an upstream, and that's just a name given to the URL there, which is pointing to the main YUI3 repository. So perfect, you have this. So we can now pull any changes from that repository and from its master branch.
Right, so let's do a git pull upstream master, right?
Yep.
And looks like I'm already up to date. Don't know what the other slackers on the team have been doing, but they haven't been committing to upstream. I tell you. It's too much time spent sleeping.
So now I don't think that, we already reviewed the change rendered out in Celic. So we saw the change and how it would look when it goes to the site. So I think we're good here. And now since this is your topic branch and you'll want to do a pull request on GitHub, this this image loader branch currently does not exist on your GitHub account. So what we'll want to do is push it to your GitHub account.
Right, so here I'm looking at GitHub, and you can see, I think, there we go.
Yeah, now we can.
So if you switch branches here, you'll see this is a fresh reload, and it doesn't show up here. The branches that it knows about on GitHub are different than the branches that are known about here locally, because this is the remote origin, and this is just local. So we'll want to git push origin image loader. So this is saying origin, which is my personal YUI3 fork. I'm going to push this, push my changes into a branch named image loader on origin. And now, because we're still waiting for people to delete their tags from their YUI3 forks, we get to wait for a couple seconds. Brian, do you want to spend this quality time explaining how they can help us out here?
Okay, so fun story. So on GitHub, when you fork a repository like YUI3, it doesn't actually copy everything to a new file. The object space of all those files on GitHub's storage are actually shared. So only the differences are copied, really. And so YUI3 used to have thousands of tags. We used to push every single build that we did to GitHub as a new tag. And so people would fork the YUI3 repo, and then you'd have a fork with thousands of tags. And then, we've got hundreds of forks out there on GitHub, each of these with hundreds to thousands of tags. And the problem is that the way GitHub works is all forks of a repo, so all forks of the YUI3 repo, share a single object space for all of their tags and branches. So every time somebody would fork YUI3, it would add another couple of thousand tags, which would make everybody's pushes to any of the YUI3 forks just a little bit slower. So a few months ago, we stopped pushing all those build tags. So now we only have, 14, 15 tags for different versions. We're trying to get people who have forked the YUI3 repo to delete those remote tags on GitHub if they don't need them. So ultimately, if everybody deletes all those thousands of tags in their forks, as people start doing that and then the tag object space gets smaller, everybody's pushes to GitHub for YUI3 will get faster.
So this is community contribution to everyone going faster. If you have a fork of YUI3, an old fork of YUI3, the recent forks of YUI3 shouldn't be causing any problems. But if you have an older fork, then please delete your tags. And Ryan, have you linked to your script that does that for them?
I will do that. There's a simple shell script that you can run in your YUI3 repo that will automatically delete your remote tags
and your private information and credit card and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it'll send me all your bank account info.
Right. But it's okay. You're in good hands. All right. So now we have a new branch up on origin. So this is lsmith YUI3. And now if I do adis, I should see image loader right there. There it is.
Why don't you switch to it too, Luke?
Okay. Alrighty.
So now we see your commit message right there.
Yep.
Cool. So at this point, you made your change, you tested it, you committed it, and created a new topic branch to house the commit, and you're ready to submit a pull request to YUI3 or to the YUI main branch. Right. So there's this nice pull request button here, and since you already switched to your topic branch, I believe when you hit the pull request button there, it should automatically be set up to say that you would like the main YUI3 master branch to merge in your changes from your topic branch, which it says there. Yep. Although it says 7 commits.
7 commits. Hmm. So I think what's going on here is these commits already exist up on master, and there's just some details syncing. Yeah, so that's the same thing that happened to you, Satya.
So one thing I think we could have done to mitigate this is when you created your topic branch originally, you said git checkout, and then you used the dash B to create a new branch flag, and specified the new name. But where the reference point for that was pointing to your local master, and probably what we should have done is had the reference point for that branch pointing to upstream master, so that way your new image loader branch would be identical to what's start off with what's identical to currently being in upstream master.
Okay, well let's do a demo of it.
That actually I don't
Is
think
that
should
correct,
matter
Aaron?
as long as I think the only time you'll see this happen is if those commits have different hashes on upstream for some reason. So that could be the result of a rebase. Maybe.
No, I don't rebase.
Well, why don't we do an experiment here and see if, because this is something that people are going to run into.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as we know, Satyam is saying that he ran into the same thing, only that he had 64 commits that he didn't want to be in there.
Something like 70, so yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
So, all right, go ahead.
So why don't we try this? Why don't we try to create a new topic branch here?
Okay.
So why don't you do git checkout dash B, and then call it image loader dash something or whatever, just to differentiate it from the first one. Yeah, and then here why don't you specify upstream / master as the reference point for creating the new branch?
Come on.
I think that should work. What's happening?
All right. So, yeah, sorry about the resizing there. So this is important. We've been using push origin space image loader. And in this case, when we're checking out from, we're creating a branch checkout, naming it this, but we're basing it on something else. So in this case, we're actually using upstream / master, right? So not a space, but a slash.
Yeah.
And that's set up to be a remote, to track the remote branch.
I guess it's, so why don't we do a git log here, and check to see what the last few commits were, and see if they match what we see up on master. So we could go look at YUI's GitHub page.
Okay, so the latest build is, or the latest commit is right there. So YUI and loader build, and
from Ryan. So that's what we see. So now I think your new image loader 2 branch has started off from the correct place that we wanted to start this topic branch from. So what we could do, so we're in this situation now where we've already made the change. We don't want to make this change again. So what we could do is we could cherry pick the commit that you made on image loader 1 over to the image loader 2 branch. So what you'll want to do is find out what the commit reference is.
Okay.
So what Luke's doing here is he's just grabbing this commit hash.
This is all far more complicated than you'll probably have to deal with in your own implementation. implementation. This is just for, in all likelihood, the commits that were showing up there, they weren't going to cause any harm, and they were actually already known commits. There was just some changes that I don't really know how to explain this very well.
So it sounds like what happened is, so YUI, as our source of truth Git repo, we have an internal Git repository that we push to. And that gets automatically, using our continuous integration setup, those commits on that internal source of truth get pushed to GitHub every 15, 30 minutes, whenever. And it sounds like what happened is that got a little bit out of sync. So Luke had some newer commits that he'd already pushed to the internal source of truth that hadn't yet made it to GitHub. And so when he sent that pull request against the GitHub master, it saw those new commits that GitHub didn't have yet. So it sounds like that's what happened.
Yeah. So what we're going to try to do here is, so if Luke was to say merge his image loader branch into the image loader 2 branch, which you don't want to actually execute, don't do that. It will pull in all those same commits that we don't want. So what cherry pick allows us to do is specify certain commits without including all previous ones, like a merge would.
Yeah, and so just to reiterate, this is a problem that should not happen to you in the community if you follow those steps on the tutorial. It's unique to our way of working.
Yeah, so I got my environment all wonky here just in time for open hours, so sorry about that. All right, so just this command then, git cherry pick and the hash?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and it looks like there's just the one file changed, and it includes that commit message there. And here, so this little arrow there says that it's okay to, or that there's something that needs to get pushed. There's a local commit that needs to get pushed. And here
so
I actually think, go ahead.
We have an option where we can just push this new branch to GitHub, or we could go through a dance of deleting the old one, renaming this one, and force pushing it over top of the old image loader branch you have on GitHub. So for the sake of simplicity, we can just push this. We can push this new image loader 2 branch up to GitHub and also name it image loader 2.
Yep. Which is a nice illustration that branches are cheap.
Yep. Create them, throw them away. Pretend like this is the 60s and we're learning about fast food for the first time. Toss that trash out the window.
Yep. So Ryan, have you linked to that script? I don't know.
I did.
Chat open.
There's
okay, good.
Just link there.
Okay.
An uphill battle. We've got hundreds of YUI3 forks, and getting the word out has been difficult. I've sent GitHub messages to a bunch of people, but not everybody yet.
Okay. So here we are. So we're going to go there. It says that I'm currently on master, but I do have an image loader 2 branch, so I'm going to change that image loader 2 branch. And now, one commit. Yay, look at that. Okay, simple typo fix. It already has the description in there from the commit, since it was from a single commit. And I don't really need to do.
Go ahead and, well, might want to check the files change just to look at the diff.
That's
just
true.
To make sure that nothing's snuck in there.
That's also a good policy. So yeah, and that's our diff. Set trigger becomes add trigger. So that's all looking good. And go back to preview discussion and send pull request. Ready?
Yeah.
Everybody? All right, good. All right. Engage. Send pull. Okay, so the pull request is sent. I now have an open pull request, and it says I want to.
Yeah. So Charles is asking, like, the trick here was using upstream master. So yeah, so what the trick was is when we wanted to create our new topic branch, we said that we wanted the starting point for that topic branch to be what's currently in upstream master, which is the main YUI3 repository. And that's where we wanted to start from, so that way we weren't starting from whatever we might have had locally on our local master branch.
Right. Yeah. As long as you're, in most cases, your local master should already be in sync with upstream, or at least behind it as opposed to ahead of it. The problem in this case was that Luke's local master was ahead of upstream, and that's why this was necessary.
Right. But from our perspective, this is what we should see, is that we get a notification that there is a pull request, a new pull request has come into the system for YUI3. And here's the new one here. And why don't I stop sharing, and Eric, I'll let you take over from here. And then you can process the rest of the pull request and walk us through that.
Okay. Hopefully this works. Whoa. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Hopefully this terminal is big enough here. So if I go look at the pull requests, Luke, I see your new one. And so even though there's this nice big green button here, I'm not going, what's that?
I think we might be lagging behind a little bit. I'm not seeing anything actually happening on your screen.
Yeah, same here.
Oh, I'm showing the pull request that Luke did.
Okay, so you're online, right? Maybe I can just change back to sharing and you can walk me through the other half.
Yeah, maybe we should do that.
Okay. Just stop sharing. I'll start it again. Like a well-oiled machine. 3 days. All right, so here we are. So there is my pull request. Look at that. And so one important thing. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead if you had an important thing.
Just an important note about using this space here. We actually mentioned that at the beginning, but there's a discussion that goes on associated with each pull request. And so this is where we and any outside contributors that might be interested in the conversation, they can start adding in their comments. Or if, for example, you don't have anything to say, but you're interested in the conversation, you want to be notified, down to the bottom of each pull request, there is a little link right here for notifications, and you'll get an email notification if someone says something on that commit. And right now it says disable notifications because I'm already on it. And this would be enable if I weren't on it, and it's disable if you already are on it and aren't interested in hearing any more of the conversation that's going on.
And it also, just to let you know, it also will, when Luke created this pull request, some of us on the team would have gotten emails notifying us that there's a new pull request so that we see that this happens.
Right. Okay. So, pull request. I don't know about you, Eric, but I think this pull request looks perfect. Absolutely flawless. There is no problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty good. It's pretty trivial, so yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
But we're still not going to hit that big green button.
Damn it.
All right. Big green button is a lie.
No, I'm not going to do it. Okay. The reason that we're not doing the big green button here is that we maintain our source of truth internally, and then we use the YUI, the YUI account and the YUI3 repo on GitHub as a push destination for the latest the latest copy of our source of truth. But the source of truth, so all the pull requests are actually going to get pulled into our local forks merged into the source of truth, and then the source of truth has some automated scripts that push those changes back out to GitHub. So this is going in the wrong direction.
That makes sure any broken, like if somebody breaks the build, like they'd make a change and their unit tests don't pass, that won't get pushed to GitHub until they start passing.
Right.
You guys don't need to worry about any of that. So basically, at this point, as a community contributor, your job is done. Now it's in our hands, and so this pull request is perfect, but if it wasn't perfect, one of us might ask Luke to make some changes. We might comment on a line and say, this isn't great, fix this.
Yeah.
So there could be some back and forth, and Luke could commit some additional commits, and then if he pushes those to his image loader 2 branch, those would automatically show up in this pull request. And once we were all finished, then we would merge those in.
So that's why it's also great for him to do this on a topic specific branch. So that way he can go off and do other work, and then if all of a sudden a discussion starts and we say no, this is wrong, or add this, or maybe you should look at doing this, or Luke finds another mistake where it says add trigger with a space between it or something like that, he can just switch over to this topic branch and make more commits and not have to then pull in anything else he's been working on in the meantime.
There was a question to me in chat. I didn't see it.
Do you have a gist available that adds the arrow and the git branch, basically your bash prompt?
Oh, sure. That was actually one of Dave's. If you look at Dave Glass's GitHub repos, there's one of them in there. Is that the git prompt? So you can check that out. We've got to close out in a couple of minutes, but this is sort of the end of the story as far as the contributor is concerned. There might be some more dialogue that happens in there, but eventually we'll merge in that pull request, and then the documentation will get pushed out. So one of the reasons, for example, the differences between a documentation pull request and a code pull request is that internally we manage 2 different branches for development cycle, at least 2 different branches. One is the ongoing development for master, which is code related, and then a separate branch for the current state of affairs and the documentation that's associated with the current production release. So right now that's 3.4.0. We're working on 3.4.1, which means that master is pointing to the 3.4.1 code base. But we do have a branch that was off of 3.4.0, which we can push documentation changes out to, and then we can propagate those documentation changes out to the site, so that this image loader doc update that can get pushed out, today, instead of having to wait for the next release of 3.4.1. So that turnaround is really great for getting the documentation updated as well. But yeah.
Yeah, and so also people are free to go look at all the current outstanding pull requests on the YUI project, and add their own commentary and stuff. So all that's available. And there's one in there from Pat that actually is a code example, a recent one, where there's some more comments with a discussion, including comments inline on. The nice thing with using GitHub is that we can make comments directly on the diff, like for a particular line of code.
Yeah. Let's see, so you added that to there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so here. Yeah, so here we're looking at that, we're reviewing that code online, and that discussion for that individual commit is also happening live online, so that's great. Sorry for all of the technical difficulties with Connect crashing and with my repo being a little bit out of sync and showing some oddities there. It is actually a really simple process, and I think that we might have made it look a little bit more complicated than it actually is. But the end result is that the change in the pull request process that we're using now puts the code and the discussion around the changes in the code more in the community's hands, and certainly in visible to the community, so the discussions that go on around those code changes are certainly more visible today than they were in weeks past. And all in all, it is a pretty simple policy. We like the feedback that we've been getting in chat, and you can keep the feedback coming in terms of maybe better documenting the process, and we'll try to make everything easier, and we look forward to your pull requests. And I think that should be it. We're running a minute over time, and we have to run off to a meeting. So let's continue the conversation in IRC, in the YUI chat room, and in the forums, and on Twitter. And we'll see you guys next week. We have Satyam is going to be joining us to go over some of the deeper stuff and his thinking in a blog post that he put out very recently about, what was that called, a make node plugin, or?
Yeah, it was
utility?
a make node extension to widget extension.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll be going over that, and we'll be putting out the YUI blog post invite for that open hours tomorrow or Monday, and so look forward to that. And so for Eric and Ryan and the rest of the team, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week.